Disha Spath, welcome to the Lean Out podcast. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely, I agree. So, for those who are listening that don't know about you, please tell us about your current roles that you're playing in work and life and what your work life balance is looking like these days.
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Dr. Disha Spath. I am a primary care and internal medicine physician, currently actually working as a per diem hospitalist. And I have two kids, two little boys, 7 and 9. I have two dogs. One is a puppy and the other one's very old. So I live in upstate New York, and I have been working on my work life balance, it seems, the entire career. I started off as a full time hospitalist, and then I changed over to full time primary care, and then realized that that just wasn't going to work for me. And I did a little bit of both internal medicine as an outpatient and as an inpatient for a little while, just working at part time at a primary care practice and then per diem as a hospitalist. And now I've recently changed over to per diem as a hospitalist. I also do a podcast called Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. I started my website about 6 years ago called thefrugalphysician.com, writing about my personal financial journey, starting out with a bunch of student loan debt, a lot of debt in general, and very negative net worth, and changing our lifestyle in order to, create assets and build a cycle of wealth and multiple streams of income. And been writing and podcasting about that for a little while now. So that's my passion project that I like to keep going, which is why I have changed over to per diem hospitalist only for the time being. Although I am currently working on starting up my own direct primary care practice, trying to figure out how that's going to look. I think primary care is my calling, and I really do want to continue to do it. I just need to find a way to make it work and for myself and for my patients.
I've known you in the blogosphere for so long, since you just had started your blog, and I remember being very impressed with it. And we started meeting each other at different conferences. We've given talks at conferences and on podcasts and things like that. And so it's fun how it's grown from just writing to doing these other things for both of us. I really
Yeah.
like that. And yet at the same time, we're both still practicing medicine because we both still really enjoy doing.
Yeah. I mean, we invested so much time and effort in learning how to be a doctor, and it is such a privilege to have the knowledge that we have, right? And it takes a lot of effort to learn the things that we've learned, and it would just be a shame in my mind to let it go to waste. I think there's so many people out there that could benefit. Nothing gives me more purpose and more pleasure than to be able to help someone, whether it's through financial education or through, helping them navigate the healthcare world, getting them the right diagnosis and the treatment and all of that. I mean, it's such a privilege. I would never let it go.
Absolutely. Tell me what prompted you to start those years ago, your original idea of the Frugal Physician, the blog that has blossomed into these other things.
Yeah, I was just struggling with the financial sphere in my life at the time. I was a full time hospitalist, and I was the sole earner for our family at the time. My husband was in school going back to get his master's. He'd just gotten a chronic health diagnosis of Crohn's, and he had been on an officer pathway. He was in the Army as a captain, and, was about to get his first the platoon to manage. He was on the right track in the Army, and then he got deployed, developed Crohn's, and then became non-deployable. At that point, it was too high risk of a condition to deploy again, and that basically ended his army career. So he decided to get out and get his master's. So, and I thought we were going to be fine. I had just gotten my first attending job. I just finished residency, and I thought, people have been living on one doctor's salary forever, right? And I'm sure we can do it too. And we did, but it was stressful. I was also having kids at the time. I had 2 children, during that time frame, and, birthing, being pregnant, breastfeeding, and being the sole learner, and working odd hours, being, in the hospital overnights and all of that. It was a very stressful job, demanding job, and, made, worse by, the biological, needs of my family, and so we decided at that time that we were kind of overstretched. We were not making financial progress, obviously, because I was having to take maternity leave, which was unpaid. And we decided that we needed to make a change. Of course, this was a lot for any family with any paycheck, but we also felt like we weren't going to be making good progress if we continued to live the way we were living, which was not really investing wisely, not trying to save wisely either. We really didn't know our financial situation or how to get ahead. So we decided to start learning. And I started reading books, and then we started implementing some of the ideas we were coming across, such as living below your means, such as optimizing life to really spend money on the things that we actually value and not spend money on the things we don't value. So we realized, for example, our TV subscription, our cable subscription, we weren't really getting anything out of that. We don't watch cable. So we're like, why are we continuing to pay like a couple of $100 every month for this? Let's cut this, and just becoming more mindful about the way we were spending our money and the way we were saving and how we were investing, and that really paid off in a big way. We were able to pay off my student loan debt, which was $238,000 in 17 months after we implemented these changes. And I really didn't think that would ever be possible in any realm of reality. And so as we started making this progress, I was like, this is kind of incredible because I don't feel like I see this in the physician sphere right now. And I really feel like I want to share the message of financial wellness, especially frugality and value-based spending. And so I started writing about it. And that's how I started my blog at the time, and, it sort of just it hit a nerve at that point. It was in the first Trump administration. The education department was a complete mess. There were a lot of people struggling with their student loan, and so that message resonated, and I continued to, learn alongside, writing and learning and getting feedback, and it's just become a thing that I do now, which is amazing. And, again, a real privilege to be able to share with my colleagues.
Well, it definitely has filled a void, like you mentioned, the value-based spending and the frugality. There were people out there that were talking about finances, but more in terms of financial literacy, which is obviously important in investing,
Right.
but not just the wealth management, but also the lifestyle management is very important. And you really hit that nail on the head. And
Thank you.
something you just said really stuck with me because in my coaching clients, I often recommend to people when they want to make changes to their work life balance and make a career transition that they go and look at their financials. And a lot of people are like, oh, um, yeah, okay. I don't know. I'm not really sure where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. They're just kind of in the dark, like you mentioned. And you said we did not know our financial situation in the first place. So, for those people, what do you recommend as first steps when they really are just like have their head in the sand and don't know what is going on with their money?
Yeah. That's the hardest part is actually looking your money in the face and figuring out who you owe what to at what interest rate. But that is the starting step is just writing down a list of your accounts, figuring out how to log into them. That's the finding the passwords, right? If you have never done it before, that's also a hard part. But that's the first step is to sit down and with your spouse if you have one and figure out where is my money, first of all? And how much do I owe and to whom? And where's my income coming from? And if you could just list those out, that's a really powerful first step because then you can add those up, see what your current net worth is, right? And it might surprise you, a negative or a positive. And once you get those down, then it's time to look at your spending. and see where that money is going. So you will probably find things that, debts that probably need to be paid off because they're high interest, or they're not bringing you any value. And so where do you find that money? You find that in your cash flow. So next is to look at the cash flow management. That is becoming easier now because a lot of banks do actually have like a budgeting app built into them, so you don't have to pay extra. So depending on wherever your primary banking site is, you're probably able to link your other spending cards to it. So if you have credit cards at, Chase or Amex, or you can link that to your primary bank and then use that budgeting tool that they have to just get an overview of your cash flow. I budget on a written spreadsheet because even though the bank does have that built in, it doesn't track it long term for you. So you can see like a snapshot, but then it goes away usually in the next 3 months or whatever. So we write it down also in our spreadsheet so that we have that to track as a long term. And what we do is not really like hardcore budgeting where we're saying, okay, it's only $200 for restaurants this month, and we're not going to go over that. Once we reach that limit, we're not doing any more. It's not quite like that. And what I usually recommend for doctors is because we do have such a high income, we don't have to be as granular. All you need to do is track your spending for 3 months. Okay, just 3 months. And by tracking, I just mean watching. It's like, a meditation for your money. You're just watching where the money comes in and where it goes out. And then after 3 months of tracking your spending, then you can decide, okay, and it's going to be obvious, the things that you're wasting money on, things that are not really bringing you value. A lot of people have no idea what kind of subscriptions they've signed up for and what they're not using anymore. And once they start tracking it, they realize, oh, well, I'm not using that very much anymore. So I can probably cut that. And that's when you can start cutting things out and identifying maybe some bad habits that need to be worked on.
I love that advice. That is very helpful. Thank you so much for laying that out that way, and also in a way that doesn't feel punitive, because I think a lot of people are just very scared to start the
Mhm.
process. And it really reminds me of when someone has a health goal, maybe they want to lose weight or they just want to eat healthier, that a lot of times the power is in the observation. And if you can have a period of observation where without judgment, you're just looking at how much you're spending and what I'm saying, like what you're eating, and you just write down what and when you're eating. And then you can look and be like, oh, I have this habit of eating at 8 p.m. when maybe I'm not really hungry or something. And it's the same kind of idea where maybe there are some things that you're spending money on that you really don't need to be spending money on. And you could be putting that towards something else. And it's
Right.
so helpful for like when people want to make changes and they feel stuck. These are the kind of things that liberate them.
Exactly. And, the parallels between healthful living and mindful spending are really vast. And it's very similar. People like to equate budgeting to like a strict diet. And it doesn't have to be that, right?
Right.
Because meaningful lifestyle change for healthful habits really comes from making small incremental changes that are sustainable and not a binge diet. So yeah, they are similar, but not to the point, they're also similar in what succeeds. That if you make small changes that will last you a lifetime, that will cause you to be more healthy over the long term. And that's really what we're looking at with our financial spending too, is not being so restrictive that we cut out everything. Although you can if you want to, but again, it's not gonna be sustainable. Finding those sustainable lifestyle changes that are really based on your values, that's what's gonna make you happy because frugality I had a recent guest, on my podcast who put it this way, "Frugality feels like winning at life, winning at money." And that's what it should feel like when you make these changes in your finances.
I love that. Well, how has starting the Frugal Physician, do you feel, changed you as a doctor, just as a person? What changes have you noticed?
That's a really interesting question. I really feel like I grew up. a lot, and I got a lot of gray hairs. Being financially wise, I think, has been a completely positive return on my investment of time and learning how to manage my finances. And then writing about it has been a very positive thing as well because, it has given me real-time feedback from the experts, and then it's given me access to the experts, so I get to have the brightest minds in the field come on my podcast and teach me live, right? And I get to share that with other people, and that's really fantastic. Where it has been somewhat negative is, number one, the amount of time it takes, right? I always constantly have to adjust my clinical life to make sure that I am accommodating my side passion project. And it does bring me money, most of the time. Not always, again, it's a business venture, so some months are, win and some months are lose, but, in general, it has given me an additional stream of income, but then it also brings public scrutiny, and I'm very much of a I'd rather be wealthy, secretly wealthy than famous, and I've actually not enjoyed the fame all that much, because, it's just not something I want, but again, it's only I'm, very E-list in the fame sense, so
If you're
so
E-list, I'm like Z-list.
so, yeah, there've been a couple, I went on a kind of a fancy vacation to Rosemary Beach, and it's, this fancy pool, and I ran into one of my readers, and I felt like I had to, justify why I spending so much money on this vacation. Um,
Oh, it's
so
funny.
yeah, so it was first of all, the moniker, the frugal physician kind of makes me feel like I should live up to that, but I don't, and I feel a little bit of a contradiction, but also, um I guess when people think of frugality, they think of someone wearing jeans and a t-shirt all day. And clothes are important to me. And that's one thing that I have put a high on my value list because growing up, I didn't have nice clothes. Only had Salvation Army clothes, because my mom was a school teacher and we were very poor. And so, that's one thing that, makes me very happy to have, nice things to wear, and I'm okay with spending my money there if I have to make cuts elsewhere, to make financial progress. Anyway, so the pressure of kind of living up to other people's expectations and then getting sometimes negative feedback real time has been the difficult part of being a very public writer about these things.
I think it's very important to distinguish that frugality is not necessarily being a miser. It's not spending any money at all and wearing tattered clothes. It really is about what you mentioned before, value-based spending and
Right.
being mindful and just saying like, I care about, so personally, you're talking about clothes. I care about skincare and I happen to spend a lot of money at Sephora, but I don't maybe spend as much money on clothes because I wear pajamas to work and I live on a farm. So, for me, it's kind of dumb to buy fancy clothes, and yes, I like them. I think they're pretty and I can appreciate them, but I don't have to own them. And this is my type of frugality. And then you have your type of frugality, and someone else is going to have something totally different where they maybe spend a lot of money on travel because that is the one thing that brings them huge amounts of joy. And they have a core value of adventure, maybe. And then they may not spend a lot on food. And maybe another person spends a lot on food because they really value food. And maybe they grew up eating beans and rice every day. I mean, there's so much that goes into this from our
Yes.
past, our culture, and just where we are now and the things that we value personally.
Exactly. So I think the important part is having that conversation with yourself, and having that every month can be really valuable. And that's
Mm.
why, my husband and I sit down and run the numbers on our spending, even now that we're doing much better than we were 6 years ago, because every month something new comes up and we find a new way to spend our money or whatever, right? And then we sit down and really think about, okay, is this bringing us value? If we sign up for a new thing, new subscription, is that bringing us value? And then just really think about it critically. Does this make me happy? Am I really getting as much as I thought out of it? If yes, then we keep, and if not, then we cut. We're pretty brutal about the things we cut because, hey, my money is my life energy. This is where I spend like my life so that we can have whatever we want in life, right? I don't want to be wasting my life energy on things that are not bringing me happiness or value. So we cut very, very liberally, and we're okay with that. So I think just having that conversation with yourself and on a regular basis can be a very valuable thing.
So, besides having the conversation with yourself, for those who are listening that have a family, that maybe have a spouse, what do you recommend for those kind of interactions or touch points for figuring out spending and directions with the other person?
Yeah. So obviously, there are going to be things that are important to you and not important to your spouse, right? So the way my husband and I accommodate for that is that we have what we call a fun fund. And so every month a line item on our budget is Josh has his fun fund and I have my fun fund. My fun fund goes towards clothes. His fun fund usually goes towards video games and gaming in general. And that is fine. That's money that we don't get to judge the other person on. And that way, everyone feels like they have what they need to be happy, their little recreation money. And then the rest we make decisions on together. So, especially if it's a spend greater than like $300, we talk to each other about
Mhm.
it just to make sure that that we're both on board and this is something that we both value because obviously it's both of our money. Now, some people decide to have separate accounts in a marriage, and that's okay if you want to do that. But I think total transparency is really important in order to make a marriage work. So even if you want to keep your money separate, I think it's important for both the players to sit down and go over the money together on a regular basis, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or yearly. There needs to be total transparency because if there are holes in your knowledge about where the partner's money is going, then that's going to cause a lot of distrust that's gonna take away from the team playing attitude of the family and really hamper your progress going forward as a family.
I agree with these points. Being married for 20, almost 26 years, we do something similar. Our amount of money where we feel like we need to talk to each other about the item has gone up as we've made more money. I think when we were really young and maybe in our 20s, it used to be like if it was more than like maybe 30 or $40, we would talk to each other. And now it's more like a couple $100, like you said.
Right. Yeah.
And then we are also one of those couples who does have separate accounts. We just always have. I don't know why. We just never merged them. It was kind of more out of laziness. But we do what you're saying, where everything gets put into an accounting software. And my husband is constantly looking at it and he'll ask me things about, what is this charge? Not in an accusatory way, just more like, I don't know what this is because I can't tell because the note on the charge is just not descriptive enough, and then you can
Absolutely.
categorize it.
Yeah. And that's one of the huge values of tracking where your money's going because there are so many times, so many months that we catch things like what was this
Mhm.
charge? And oh, this was a
Yeah,
double charge or hey, they raised the rate on this utility without telling us or um a lot of times the companies will just start bumping the rate by like $10 or something so you don't notice. And if you just call them and be like, "Hey, what's up with this?" They'll be like, "Oh, it's just kidding. We're gonna bump you back down," right? And
yeah,
hey, that's like one phone call and you've saved yourself a bunch of money, right? So that's the value in tracking your spending too, is that you number one are aware of overcharges, and number two, you can keep track of them so that you can get that stuff down and also make sure that you're not being defrauded in any way. Fraud's a huge thing. And if you're not tracking your accounts, then unless the credit card company picks it up, you might stay in the dark for a little while.
absolutely. That's very good advice. I'm wondering what other advice you might have for someone because a lot of the people that are listening are in high octane professions that have a big debt burden, like you did a number of years ago, who says, I cannot pay off this debt. This is just impossible. It's going to take me forever. I don't feel like I can do anything or make any changes until this debt is gone, but it's basically like it's a weight over my head.
So, anyone with a large income certainly has a way, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. So, I would challenge that. Um, and the interesting thing about debt payoff and amortization schedules is that if you make the minimum payments over like the life of the loan, you're going to pay so much more interest, and most of that interest is front loaded. Um, but if you make extra payments on top of your regular payment, the amount of interest you're going to pay becomes so much less if you put a bunch of money at that loan up front rather than spreading it out. So, for example, if you had three different debts, right? And you tried to make the minimum payment plus like $100 extra on each debt over the length of the loan, you would actually end up paying significantly more interest than if you took that $300 and just put it towards one debt at a time. And that's the concept of a debt avalanche or a debt snowball is based on the fact that if you put a bunch of money at one loan and pay that off and then pay the next one off and then pay the next one off, it's actually a whole lot more efficient mathematically than trying to pay them all off at the same time.
Mm.
So,
I
um,
don't know that people realize that. That's a very good point.
yeah, that's so it seems like a bigger burden than it is because of the amortization schedules and how they're built. If you actually looked at the amount you would pay if you paid one debt off at a time and made minimum payments on everything else, you actually can shave off like significant amounts of time on your debt payoff journey. So it might look impossible to start and pay them all off at the same time. It may be, but it's actually very, very possible if you choose one debt and go after it, and then the next debt and the next debt. Then it becomes a whole lot more feasible. And the way you decide which debt is the worst depends on whether you're a math person or whether you need a little bit more psychological kick. So if you're a math person and want to pay the least amount of interest possible, go for the highest interest debt first.
Mm.
Um, because if you pay off, for most people, it's going to be a credit card debt because those are the highest interest debts that are out there, like 19-25%, right? So definitely go up after that credit card debt and just pay that off, and you're going to see humongous gains because when you're paying 20% interest on something monthly, it is impossible to make financial progress. So get that debt gone if you have credit card debt. And after that, if you are a psychological person, going for the smallest amount of debt and not paying attention to the interest rates might make sense for you. Um, but you know, the what going for the smallest amount of debt, what it does, it helps you get that debt paid off and gives you the psychological win you need to keep going. And then you go for the next smallest debt and then the next smallest debt. Um, and so that's called a debt snowball. And if you go for the highest interest rate first, that's called a debt avalanche. Both them are very effective at helping you get rid of your debt. The debt avalanche helps you pay less interest over time, and the debt snowball gives you the motivation to keep going and keep saving and keep paying down that debt.
But what I'm hearing from you, though, is that you need to know yourself and which one you better respond to, and kind of like which one gives you more fear or more anxiety.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, in the end, if you run the numbers, there's a very yes, the avalanche is more efficient, but there's not too much difference between the two. The difference between doing either the debt snowball or the avalanche or trying to just pay them all off at the same time, though, is huge. You would make a whole lot more progress if you just pick a debt. It doesn't matter which strategy you use, just pick a debt, pay that off. Pick the next debt, pay that off. And you will make significant progress.
You've given us such great financial tidbits and advice today. And in closing, I want to ask you something else about you. You talked a little bit in the beginning about what you're doing now and the evolution of your clinical career mixed with the frugal physician. And what do you see for the near future? Talk a little bit about your dreams for what you want your life to look like.
That's a great question. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what my dreams are. I think, what I want to do with my life next is a direct primary care practice. So, primary care, I'm trying to decide between direct primary care versus a lifestyle medicine practice where it's more consultative. I want to run my own ship. I've had a long time of being an employee, and I am ready to make healthcare work for me and my patients better. And so I'm really looking forward to that next entrepreneurial step and having less debt and having set us up in this way where we do have the leeway to do that. The financial wellness has made it possible to even consider that. If I had student loan debt, it would not be an option. And I certainly could not be working as per diem right now. And so having also a spouse with benefits who's holding down a W-2 job is important for that as well. So it's nice that he's able to, provide the benefits for the family that we need. So I think that gives me a little bit more freedom to do what I want. And, um, and that's the hard part is deciding what I want.
Mm. Yes.
And so I'm taking some time right now to think about that and really hash that out perfectly before I begin. In the meantime, I do enjoy podcasting and I do enjoy educating. So I'm making sure that I keep that in my life. I'm working on a new podcast with my hospital system to educate the hospital staff on different issues that we are identifying as we go on. And so working on that. And I'm also working on starting a new patient facing podcast to promote my new primary care practice that will be based on healthcare education for patients.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I love all of those ideas. And I think you're really doing it right by taking time and really being reflective and learning and thinking about what it is that really is going to bring you the most joy. And for you, and also for any listeners that are out there that have this interest in potentially starting their own DPC or a micro practice, I have a few interviews from people that are doing it, and I'm going to link those in the show notes for this episode so that you can find them easily. Disha, tell us exactly where we can find you and get all of the good financial education. What is the name of the website, the podcast, and everything?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm at www.thefrugalphysician.com. And that's where you can find my blog and the podcast. The podcast is called Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician, and that's available on all major podcasting platforms or on that website. I'm on social media at the Frugal Physician. So that's the Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And you can email me at thefrugalphysician@gmail.com if you just want to get in touch.
Thank you, Disha, so much. It has been a pleasure to talk to you. It's great to see you again, and I hope to see you again soon in real life.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and it's always so fun talking to you and so inspiring. So thank you.